We are live. Thank you all for tuning in to The Barracks, your non-Euclidean network for a multipolar world, bringing you news, bringing you Marxist-Leninist theory, bringing you into this, what Alexander Dugin calls the heptapolar world order. That is a lot of poles, 7 to be exact. And we're going to be talking about 2 of them today, the relationship between the United States quasi-unipolarity versus the rising African pole of civilization, and how this emerging civilizational power, backed of course by China and Russia, is under threat by the U.S. diplomatic arms of the military humanists, as Max Blumenthal has called them. We're going to talk about it. First, just for those of you tuning in the future, make sure to follow The Barracks, whether you're watching on YouTube or x.com. We dual broadcast. You can follow us there as well at The Barracks Live on X, or you can follow us here on YouTube at The Barracks News. Make sure to follow us on Telegram, because you never know when we're going to get shut down, because you can't talk about the rise of the 21st century, the African century, without ruffling some feathers. So we do appreciate you following us wherever we go live. You can. There's the Telegram handle right there, or you can follow us at x.com at The Barracks Live, putting it in the chat now. But before we get into it, we have some breaking news. This makes it for a good little icebreaker. You know, when you plan to talk about African coups going off, you know, you get, that tends to be, I'm trying to give an overview of what's going on, but then you get hit by breaking news like this, where House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, the representative in the 3rd highest government office in U.S. government, has been ousted from his position today in a vote. It has been made official. The gavel has been dropped. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy ousted in a vote that was brought to the floor by his arch rival and chief MAGA leader in Congress, Matt Gaetz, representative from Florida. So I think before we get into, how's it going? Bang, bang, Boyd. Good to see you in the chat. So before we get into our main overview of what's going on in the African continent, you know, it's a good little icebreaker to see a little U.S. coup going on, a little coup of the Uniparty going on. It is worth mentioning that this is the first time in U.S. history that the Speaker of the House has been ousted from their position. This was one of the more notorious concessions that Kevin McCarthy had made when he was voted into the speakership back in January, that the threshold for bringing this type of a vote to the floor needed a minimum of 1, which Representative Matt Gaetz made full use of and has now removed Senator McCarthy from his position. So I want to hear it from Matt Gaetz before we get into an article from The Atlantic, one of the more hawkish mainstream online outlets, and their interpretation of events. I want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. Because I do agree with Matt Gaetz here when he says that voting out Kevin McCarthy is not the cause of the chaos. The cause of the chaos was the Uniparty. He makes some good points here. I think we should give him a listen.
That the White House, House Democrats, Mr. Speaker, my friend from Oklahoma says that my colleagues and I who don't support Kevin McCarthy would plunge the House and the country into chaos. Chaos is Speaker McCarthy. Chaos is somebody who we cannot trust with their word. The one thing that the White House, House Democrats, and many of us on the conservative side of the Republican caucus would argue is that the thing we have in common, Kevin McCarthy said something to all of us at one point or another that he didn't really mean and never intended to live up to. I don't think voting against Kevin McCarthy is chaos. I think 33 trillion in debt is chaos. I think that facing a $2.2 trillion annual deficit is chaos. I think that not passing single subject spending bills is chaos. I think the fact that we have been governed in this country since the mid-90s by continuing resolution and omnibus is chaos. And the way to liberate ourselves from that is a series of reforms to this body that I would hope would outlast Speaker McCarthy's time here, would outlast my time here, and would outlast either of our majorities. Reforms that I have heard some of the most conservative members of this body fight for, and some of the reforms that we've been battling for that I've even heard those in the Democrat caucus say would be worthy and helpful to the House, like open amendments, like understanding what the budget is. We have been out of compliance with budget laws for most of my life, most of many of your lives. And by the way, if we did those things, if we had single subject bills, if we had an understanding on the top line, if we had open amendments, if we had trust and honesty and understanding, there would be times when my conservative colleagues and I would lose, might be a few times when we'd win. There'd be times that we would form partnerships that might otherwise not be really predictable in the American body politic, but the American people would see us legislating. These last few days, we've suspended the momentum that we had established the week earlier, where we were bringing bills to the floor, voting on them, staying late at night, working hard. That's what the American people expect. It's something Speaker McCarthy hasn't delivered, and that's why I've moved to vacate the chair. I reserve.
So it looks like Matt Gaetz has gotten what he wanted. He who was one of the leaders of the about 10 MAGA Republicans in Congress who were opposing Kevin McCarthy's ascendancy to the speaker position in holding out their vote to confirm him. So that McCarthy had to go through 15 rounds of votes before finally, giving many concessions to the MAGA caucus before finally getting the speakership. And now he's one of the shortest speakers in U.S. history, if not the shortest, and is the first to be ousted, which is significant in that it does put a significant amount of chaos in an already divided House, but in a deeply divided country like ours. I do agree with Mr. Gaetz here when he says that this chaos was not it was not done on by him individually or MAGA as a movement, or even institutionally by the Republican Party. This chaos has been enforced on the United States for decades. He says the mid-90s, but it's even been before that. Since the founding of the country, chaos has been waged against average Americans by the uniparty, by political parties united in their servitude to private interests, to private corporate interests, the banks, what President Andrew Johnson had called the money power. Still alive today, and still inflicting class warfare through rising of inflation, through pushing through endless wars, through deindustrializing the country, This is where the real chaos lies. Bang Bang Void says, someone said the Dem progressives had to fight for people and Gates had to fight for donors. That's flipping things. Exactly. Like you think AOC is fighting for the people and not the donors? See who's been doing the most to obscure how much she's doing to fund Ukraine and to defend actual Sieg-heiling fascists in Zelensky's government. She's just like pleasing her handlers and in top leadership in the Democrat Party. Please, like professional leftists are out of their mind. Matt Gaetz might be the only person I can think of in government, right, in American government right now, who is actually upholding the spirit of MAGA. I mean, Trump is not in office himself, but even Trump is starting to move away from the counter-hegemonic movement that he helped start. We all know, his relentless kowtowing to war hawks and trying to play up the fact that he assassinated Qasem Soleimani, the general of Iran's defense forces. So, and him more and more just aligning with with these intelligence juntas and with these private donors who he has been trying to appease as he's waging these ongoing legal battles. Matt Gaetz is bringing that fresh energy back in, at least into the Beltway, as much as you can bring energy into the Beltway. So I would like to salute Mr. Matt Gaetz. I don't trust him in that you can never trust a DC politician, but he racks up a lot of wins, and for this we must give him his dues. It's the integrity of the radical wings of the party. And Matt Gaetz isn't even radical. He represents like the popular will of the American people who have been vocally pushing back against the the three biggest concerns in the country right now: ending the Ukraine war, ending inflation, and ending mass illegal immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border. And he has been consistently saying to Kevin McCarthy, you, sir, Mr. McCarthy, have not been doing your job in representing those major concerns that the people have. Kevin McCarthy helped stop the government shutdown, kowtowing to the Democratic Party, kowtowing to Biden's regime, to not address any radical reforms needed at the border, sending along $6 billion more to Ukraine, and not addressing the debt ceiling of this out-of-control spending, getting us into endless wars, turning on the money printer. So it's what Democrats will call the fringe, the hard right. What they'll call it, the hard right of the Republican Party might be fringe, but they're not radical. Very sensible is what Mr. Gaetz is talking about. Good to have you in the comments, Yankee Tanky. Hope you're enjoying your retirement, sir. 10 days without a live. I was starting to think you retired too. No, you can never retire. There's too much there's too much chatter going on in the people's deep state. I, as the de facto leader of the people's deep state, now that the milkman has also gone into semi-retirement, now there is too much responsibility on my shoulders to retire now. But I salute you, sir, for being in the comments and holding down the live stream in the comments section. So while we're waiting for more people to get into the room, I think it's worth reading through this article by The Atlantic I've got my methods of getting around paywalls, so I will share it here with you, so that you can also get around some paywalls. But yeah, it is important to stress just how in line legacy media is in attacking the 8 Republican congressmen who ousted McCarthy. McCarthy, who doesn't even represent the Democratic Party, but Democrats but Democrats knowing that he is willing to bow to everything that they ask for. So you still have people attacking Matt Gaetz for ousting McCarthy, and that kind of sentiment is, I think, is displayed here in The Atlantic, one of the more hawkish legacy media publications, one of the DC rags. It goes, Kevin McCarthy meets his fate. Kevin McCarthy began his 269th day as House Speaker by recounting all the times he proved his doubters wrong. In January, after a series of humiliating defeats, the California Republican hung on to become Speaker of the House. In the months since, he reminisced, he has narrowly averted the twin crises of a national debt default and, this past weekend, a government shutdown. I might add, just to go on a tangent here for a second, I might add that this is what Gaetz is talking about. Nobody wants to call the aversion of the debt default. Nobody in the Beltway in Washington and in these think tanks and these media outlets wants to call averting the debt default a crisis, when increasing the debt ceiling to $33 trillion, an unprecedented number, a number that has been reached than any other presidency in the United States combined. Nobody wants to call continuing that debt ceiling a crisis. They want to say continuing to grow it is business as usual, and call it a good thing, call it a day. Calling avoiding a government shutdown, which would mean sending billions more of taxpayer dollars to Ukraine. At this point, each American citizen has given the equivalent of $900 out of their own pockets. You have given $900 out of your pocket to Ukraine since the beginning of the war last February. But these media outlets don't want to call that a crisis. So once again, I think Matt Gaetz nailed it on the head. To continue, McCarthy said, "I just don't give up," McCarthy told reporters after making one more plea to his party to keep him in his post. Today, McCarthy's streak of defying his skeptics came to an end, as a group of his GOP critics joined Democrats to vote him out of the speakership after less than 9 months in office. This does remind you of what the UK was going through last year, speeding through 3 different prime ministers. Chaos under heaven. The conditions are perfect, as Mao says. The unprecedented move could paralyze the House for days or even weeks as Congress faces a November 17th deadline for funding the federal government. Whether McCarthy is done as Speaker for good remains unclear. The vote to remove him will trigger a new election, and McCarthy was coy with reporters earlier in the day about whether he'd try again to reclaim the gavel. Assuming he doesn't, his tenure atop the House, the briefest in nearly 150 years, was as historic as it was short-lived. Right? Yeah, the limp-wristed, glad-handed a shill for the Uniparty was historic, sure. Again, business as usual. He won the office after fighting through more ballots than any speaker in a century, and he was the first to be removed in the middle of a term by a vote of the House. Few of McCarthy's 54 predecessors had assumed the speakership with lower expectations. Brutal. His years rising to the GOP leadership had left him with a reputation as a glad-handing lightweight with few conviction, and his majority seemed ungovernable from the start. He had just a 5-vote margin over the Democrats and was surrounded by hardliners who demanded confrontation over compromise. McCarthy traded away much of his power as Speaker during the marathon series of votes that ended after 15 rounds with his election. As part of the horse trading, McCarthy handed his Republican foes the means of his own destruction. This is what I alluded to earlier. The ability for a single member to call at any time a vote on whether to remove the Speaker. And now, here we are 9 months later, and Chekhov's gun has been set off. From day one, he knew, and everyone knew, that he was living on borrowed time, Representative Jerry Connolly of Virginia told me recently. McCarthy's most ardent Republican critic, Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, had made the Speaker's ouster his singular mission, even before McCarthy made a surprise reversal on Saturday to avert a government shutdown. Gaetz ultimately convinced 7 Republicans to join him in voting to remove McCarthy via a procedural maneuver known as a motion to vacate the chair. Democrats faced their own conundrum. Was the Speaker they knew a safer bet than a replacement they didn't? Whichever Republican succeeds McCarthy is likely to be just as conservative and just as beholden to the hardline faction that deposed him, if not more so. Again, just to highlight here that McCarthy was not beholden to these so-called hardliners, people who, the MAGA caucus in the Republican Party, who were simply trying to defend the interests of their constituency. McCarthy, who at every opportunity tried to give the Uniparty and their donor class what they wanted without any pushback. Yeah, he did concede a few things here and there, but still the move overall has been to continue funding Ukraine, continuing to keep the border open and leave the immigration crisis unaddressed, to raise the debt ceiling, to continue pushing for billions of dollars in aid to counterinsurgency movements in other countries like Kenya, like Haiti, like more recently Armenia. So this is some sleight of hand, because it's more so to the credit of those members of the MAGA caucus fighting so hard to get those concessions from Kevin McCarthy. The fact that he conceded at all is nothing short of impressive. The article continues, the Speaker had lurched to the right far more often than he governed from the center. He had joined that citation needed. He had joined the bulk of the GOP in forgiving former President Donald Trump for his role in fomenting the Capitol insurrection on January 6, 2021, and just a month ago buckled to conservative demands to launch an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. It is now the responsibility. Yeah, but it wasn't. They weren't calling it hardline when the Democrats were pushing to impeach Trump twice. Nobody was calling that hardline. That was just common sense. That was just some common sense business from all members of Congress. But when it's Biden who has actual corruption charges, like very credible corruption charges of having his son, Hunter Biden, sell his father's influence to overseas interests like Gazprom in Ukraine. Yeah, no, but that can all be swept under the rug. You know, to call for an impeachment is hard line. We have to call out this hypocrisy. To continue, quote, it is now the responsibility of the Republican members to end the House Republican Civil War, the House Minority Leader, Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York, declared after a lengthy Democratic Party conference this morning, urging his members to support McCarthy's removal as Speaker. In the end, McCarthy almost survived only because Democrats struggled to get their members to the Capitol in time for the crucial votes. So that is, isn't that something? McCarthy, however, had suffered too many Republican defections for it to matter. The process began with a vote on the motion to table Gates' motion to vacate the chair. 11 Republicans voted with the entire Democratic caucus to clear the way for McCarthy's ouster, more than twice as many members as the Speaker could afford to lose within his own party. The office of Speaker of the House of the United States, House of Representatives, is hereby declared vacant. Representative Steve Womack of Arkansas presided over the vote, said after the 216-210 roll call concluded. No obvious successor has emerged. And the article goes on for another 2 paragraphs. But I think you get the gist. The United States Congress has now become so divided that the Speaker of the House position is now left vacant for weeks, potentially. With a stopgap bill, with a deadline of November 17th, only a month and a half away, to resolve further funding for all federal programs in the United States. Hell of a time to be following US politics. And that's not what this video is about. Now that we have more people in the room, we can move on to the main story, which is the updates over the Niger coup and the growing insurgencies in West and East Africa in response from these revolutionary governments and from the United States. I just think it does this well to highlight that the U.S. empire is not as united as it has been in recent decades. You know, this leaves much room, as whenever there are divisions in the ruling class, this leaves much room for Marxist-Leninists like us to assert ourselves as leaders of the American public who is sick and tired of the chaos, as Matt Gaetz called it. So we should push this divide even further, a divide that comes from within the Uniparty itself, and that serves for the people to actually make use of this division to end funding to Ukraine and to find someone who actually has the balls to close the border. Yankee Tanky says, "What I hope is because they cannot vote for any bill until they get a new speaker, that for the next 40 days or so, they can't vote for anything and it forces a government shutdown, lol." Yeah, I mean, I would say they would elect anybody who would avoid a shutdown before they let that happen. Again, they can't let they can't let their paychecks go blank. But yeah, I do think this does present a rare opportunity for Congress to stop funding the Ukraine war, at least for a number of days, maybe weeks. So we'll see how this develops. Yes, I also want to shut down again. As communists, we should want to see further divisions in the corporate political parties that represent the bankers who continue to launder money for the cartels and who continue to push weapons manufacturing to make super profits as they send people off to die to turn Ukraine into the next Israel. Dig out the rot, exactly. The only way to dig out the rot is by cracking open the state, pulling out and draining the swamp, pulling out the pus, pulling out the infected, decrepit layer of shadow government and exposing it to the light. But yeah, we'll have to continue following this unprecedented ousting Speaking of oustings, you came here because the thumbnail for this video was baller, wasn't it? Shout out to Bing AI generators. Bing as a search engine is now better than Google. Who would have thunk? I'm shook. But now Bing, with the help of ChatGPT-4, is a far and away better search engine. And now with AI image generation capabilities, far and away better service than Google. I'm shook. Look at the results on the video thumbnail and judge for yourself. I digress. So over the weekend, the leader of Niger, the de facto leader of the coup that took power just a few months ago, General Abdourahmane Tiani, made a couple of statements, specifically that colonization was over, justifying the coup that he had led, ousting the French occupying forces, UN forces, and more recently the last French ambassador in the region, ousting them from the country, and saying it is the people of Niger who will dictate future relations with France, saying the resumption of our cooperation with France depends on the sovereign will of the people. And he went on to say, justifying this coup, which more honest men in the media like Jackson Hinkle call revolutions, that the justifying this coup, overthrowing former President Bazoum, who was pro-French and therefore pro-French, pro-debt to the French, saying that not only have the French not chased away the terrorists, but the terrorists are getting bigger and bigger. And if you've been following updates of the Sahel region, so the sub-Saharan African belt, over which half a dozen countries have started coups over recent years, most of them former French colonies, the big three being Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, have all been racked by a growing insurgency movement of different groups, whether they be Boko Haram in northern Nigeria or Al-Shabaab in the east coast of Africa, coming out of Somalia, or the Tuareg insurgents representing the fake country of the Republic of Azawad, one of the many U.S.-backed fake countries, fake land-backed countries. These are one of the many coalescing forces, insurgent groups, who are outing themselves as anti-Niger revolutions, anti-Niger coup, anti-Mali coup, anti-military takeovers who were pushing against French neocolonialism. How do we know this? Well, if you look on Telegram at channels like Africa Intel, and you can also follow our the Barracks Telegram chat to keep abreast of these updates. I'll drop the link in the chat again now that there are more people in the chat. Details in the Telegram. But coalescing insurgent movements, such as rebels in Niger, calling themselves the Council of Resistance for the Republic, CRR, issuing a statement in French, so it's not, there's no point in bringing it up on the screen. You can join the Telegram for visuals, but saying that he wants unity with Tuareg insurgents in Mali and Niger, both of which share a border, these and both are which in the sub-Saharan region that absorbed a lot of these insurgent groups after the collapse of Libya. That's where the Tuareg rebels had come from, heavily armed. After the fall of Libya, they had gone to Libya to fight when it became a war zone under the UN multilateral bombing of Libya. After Gaddafi's assassination, the Tuareg rebels, now heavily armed and with no mission to speak of, went south to start harassing, most notably the government in Mali, trying to declare the northern part of the country, which is mostly desert, and most of the population living in the southern part of Mali, trying to form this separatist movement to declare the creation of the Republic of Azawad, which would be their like a Tuareg ethnic republic. One of the just one in the laundry list of land back ethnic ethno states. Azawad being one of the lesser known, but the more commonly known: Ukraine, Taiwan, Kurdistan. Some of you might know Biafra in southern Nigeria, Khalistan in northern India. All of these fake countries, the Republic of Artsakh in Azerbaijan, that's one we're going to have to keep an eye out for, but has been an ongoing struggle since the 90s, since the fall of the Soviet Union. But Azawad is another one you're going to have to keep an ear out for, as rebels in Niger call for unity with Tuareg insurgents who have been harassing Mali since 2012. The statement continues that together the leader of this Niger Insurgency Council of the CRR, Risa Agbula, has issued this statement saying together these the three states, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, form the Alliance of Sahel States. CRR accused Mali and its, quote, Wagner supporters of genocide and called for the reestablishment of democracy in quote unquote democracy in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Risa Agbula reiterated his support for the ousted Mohamed Bazoum. So isn't it funny that these insurgents who are decrying the military in Burkina Faso, taking over and crushing democracy, is calling for the reinstatement of this pro-French shill who has not seen any infrastructure built in Burkina Faso? Ibrahim Traore, who has been in power since last September, for the first time in decades, not since the 80s. Now that he is in power, civilians in one of the poorest regions in the world are seeing infrastructure, are seeing actual development of their country, and not just seeing all the wealth of their nation go to French banks, to go to Emmanuel Macron. But somehow these these land back insurgents, these ethno-nationalists, represent the Democratic majority? I raise an eyebrow. We make a critique of it. Yeah, the Yankee Tanky is right. Make sure to like the stream. We got 7 people in here. Make sure to like the stream. Subscribe to the YouTube page or to the Twitter or to the Telegram. You take your goddamn pick, but you make sure to like and subscribe. 2 out of 3 members of the barracks in semi-permanent retirement. You gotta support somehow. But yeah, going back to these these land back insurgents. It's funny. Related to these coups, at the same time as these revolutionary governments are coming to power, you have the United States muscling its way in onto the eastern and southern parts of the African continent. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, the first ever Secretary of Defense to visit Kenya, I believe it was. Yeah, he just had his first tour, as the first African tour as Secretary of Defense. Just finished it last week. Went to visit Djibouti, which is the only country in Africa that has a official U.S. base. There are plenty of outposts and black ops sites all over the African continent, but the only official military base in Djibouti. So he went to visit there. He went to visit Kenya. Like as I said, I believe he was the first Secretary of Defense to visit Kenya. And he went to visit Angola. So 2 countries on the eastern part of Africa and 1 on the southern half. So notably where there is, in this sort of contrast to the north and west of Africa, which has been seeing so much revolutionary movement. Just putting a stamp of the American military in these diplomatic ventures, increasing, trying to increase the partnerships between Africa and the United States. Also, making a visit to Africa, none other than the head of USAID, Samantha Power. The USAID being the diplomacy arm of the State Department, giving out billions of dollars to charity projects, or to different separatist movements, regime change operations, non-government organizations, different civilian infrastructures that push for U.S. interests abroad. Samantha Power made a visit to Kenya. And, the same Samantha Power who cheered on the invasion of Syria as, military humanism, the military intervention being the humanistic option. That same Samantha Power, not just in making a visit to Kenya, but also recently making a visit to Armenia after Azerbaijan took over Nagorno-Karabakh, otherwise known as the Republic of Artsakh, which and she has been calling for hundreds of millions of dollars of aid to the Armenians and to sanction Azerbaijan, trying to instigate and escalate a conflict which Russia had been trying to mediate, to try and de-escalate, trying to make sure civilians weren't caught in the middle of crossfire, trying to transport people away from conflict zones, trying to be a neutral party in de-escalating this decades-long conflict. Samantha Power immediately comes in and tries to escalate this conflict in the Caucasus to become a hot war. So, to give you an idea of how of what her aims are when she visits Kenya, to talk about these to talk about giving aid for civilian infrastructure for farming programs, and a little bit of crumbs here, a little bit of crumbs there, most of it going to counter terrorism efforts. Isn't it funny that right after these that, after these two U.S. Politicians are done with their, tour in Kenya, that Kenya makes good on its UN resolution to send 1,000 Kenyan police officers to Haiti, to bolster security. Isn't that funny? And that UN resolution had been made some months ago, but it was this very soft commitment. It wasn't, no details had been hammered out. Nothing was set in stone. But now, as of, again, over the weekend, Kenya has made it official that they will be sending this police force. No definite date for this in the future, but they have committed to it. And just to give you an idea of who the Kenyan police forces are, here's a video that Max Blumenthal had shared, but which is here, the original post is the People's Watchman, a video of Kenyan police robbing a man of his motorcycle. If you can see the clip here. Yeah, footage of
soko ama iwapo wanakutana na pia vile vile hatujaweza kupata habari zozote kutoka kwa
footage of on the news here. This is in Kenya, just police forces robbing a man of his motorcycle, beating him with sticks, and this is well documented. The Kenyan police forces committing torture and all sorts of human rights abuses. Naturally, countries like China and Russia in this UN decision had abstained from a vote in approving this Kenya-led security delegation, because they understand that such a move to bolster security in a country as devastated as Haiti requires a much more nuanced touch than beating civilians with sticks and taking their vehicles. Yeah, Screws in a Bell says maybe getting some Kenyan resources, some harsh combat experience, death squad training in Haiti to bring back to the mother continent. Yeah, that seems to be the case here. This has been the core function of U.S. diplomacy and institutions like USAID for decades, using counterinsurgency as a bargaining tool. The CIA will fund and unleash all of these terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab, like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS, like the Mujahideen in the 80s in Afghanistan, like the Contras, like take your pick. And after creating these groups, USAID will come in and demand hundreds of millions of dollars will give a country hundreds of millions of dollars to bolster their counterterrorism forces. And it's only upon developing these counterterrorism forces will they be given aid in other places. Which is why if you go and look up all the public spending, you can go look it up right now, public government spending from the government to Kenya, half of the money is for counterterrorism. So that gives you an idea of the cycle of creating this web of control over the global periphery, unleashing insurgent forces, and then unleashing equally harsh government crackdowns as a necessary condition of receiving more aid. Creating this, and never extinguishing terrorist forces, never giving so much support that Al-Shabaab which is in the same region as Kenya, is eradicated, just shrunk down enough where you need to continue spending hundreds of millions of US dollars in foreign aid to keep up these counterterrorism forces. Instead of developing roads, instead of building up agriculture and farmland, and modernizing farm equipment, instead of building housing, instead of going to public education, it goes to this. It goes to people like this, who then become an international threat, just going to Haiti to get to get their licks in against the Haitian population. 80% of Haitian territory is controlled by gangs at this point. So who is going to be recording these men when they go in to start committing atrocities of their own? The last time foreign military intervention came into Haiti 20 years ago came accusations of rape and also introduced cholera onto the island, killing tens of thousands. Oh, but yeah, you had said, excuse me, you had said, maybe to get in some combat experience and urban training. That's part of it. But I pulled up a clip here, and I have it bookmarked as well, of why the U.S. likes to make these kinds of death squads a global effort. I have a clip here from Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, not where my name comes from, by the way. Just want to point that out. Who talks about why the U.S. targets Haiti so much, and I think this is I think this
Haiti brings.
I think this is closer to the reason why. I'm going to play this clip by Kwame Ture.
Haiti brings pride to Africans who know history. In 1803, Haiti was the most democratic country in the world. It was the only country in the world that did not allow slavery on its borders. The only country in the world in 1803. Once you properly understand this history, because these capitalist pigs have such a way of making it appear as if we've never done anything as Africans. We don't know democracy. We don't know democracy. In 1803, Africans gave the freest nation to the entire world. The only country in the world that did not allow slavery was Haiti. And not only did not allow it, but the only country in the world that put its natural resources towards fighting against any oppression was Haiti. Simon Bolivar, who liberated South America, anyone who knows the history knows it was Haiti that gave him the money, outfitted him with ships to start the struggle. And the Haitians demanded only one thing of Bolivar. When you free Venezuela, when you free Colombia, when you free Argentina, when you free Peru, free the slaves. The only condition of which they required of Simon Bolivar. This is history.
This is history indeed. We're seeing history play out since the Haitian Revolution. This has been U.S. foreign policy to continue punishing Haiti for daring to have a revolution that freed 90% of its population. Because, as Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, pointed out, once they got their liberation, development happens very quickly. Once one enslaved group is liberated, all the other enslaved groups start organizing to liberate themselves, just like we're seeing in the Sahel region of Africa right now. This is no coincidence. This is historical development. This is a historical law. Haitians aiding movements on the South American continent simply because they understand that they are the majority. And when you liberate the majority, 95% of the island, you free yourself to develop the full capacity of the productive forces. You get the full fruit of everything you've been working for. You're not enslaved. Your body does not belong to some hostile master. The fruits of your labor do not belong to some emperor across the sea. They belong to you because you sweat and bled into the soil. And Haiti had to be punished for that. Just as, in the United States, the American working class has been punished over and over again simply for daring to secure the American dream for themselves. We're seeing people like Kevin McCarthy kowtow to Wall Street to continue funding the Ukraine war and to continue keeping the borders open, to punish you, to punish all the people, all the countries from where these people are fleeing. That's why Samantha Power and Lloyd Austin find it so urgent to turn thugs in Kenya from a local psychopathic death squad to an international psychopathic death squad, to export this urban counterterrorism, to treat you as the insurgent, simply for getting up, going to work, and demanding you get what you were promised. It's the American dream. For Haitians, the dream of liberation, which they have never stopped demanding. They have never forgotten. Poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, they have not forgotten what they have earned. And this is the same, I talk a little bit about this on my Telegram. This is why Samantha Power, right after going to Kenya, winds up in Armenia after this tragic ethnic cleansing that happened with the Azerbaijani government clearing out all of a majority, 90% or more, if I'm not mistaken, it's 90% at this point or more of the 100,000 people that were living in the region who were majority Armenian, have evacuated them from this region and claimed total ownership over it. Russia was, overseeing this conflict, trying to keep it from turning into a hot war. But increasingly, Armenia, the president of Armenia, the prime minister of Armenia, Pashinyan, has been forsaking his decades-long relationship with Russia in order to saddle up to the United States. And increasingly, it looks like this could escalate into, the kind of hot war that is the result of U.S. diplomacy, giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Armenia on the condition that most of it goes to weapons and bolstering up their military, calling for sanctions against Azerbaijan, such that the people, people still in the region, wouldn't then be able to get access to life-saving medical care or fuel to travel, electricity to keep their lights on. The kind of escalation that never happened when Russia was overseeing was mediating the conflict. Things kept more or less relatively stable for 30 years. As stable as it could be in the Caucasus, in this region that never really recovered since the collapse of the USSR. That's the point. If there's anything that proves that U.S. imperialism is not about this colonial extraction of resources, it's Samantha Power going to give hundreds of millions of dollars to Armenia in order to escalate this decades-long conflict. What resources are there to exploit in Armenia? What economy? Armenia has no economy to speak of. Azerbaijan's economy is 10 times bigger. What is there to exploit? This is simply about stabbing Russia in its soft underbelly, which is the Caucasus, and which has always been the Caucasus, as outlined by Zbigniew Brzezinski in the 90s. This is just decades old chessboard being played out to the letter, stabbing Russia in the underbelly so that it never becomes another global superpower like it was when it was the USSR. For no other reason than to eliminate competition and make sure to salt the earth when you take them out. And everyone who stands in the way, innocent bystanders, are just pawns in the game. Pawns in the game. Finally, to prove my point, who else comes to the aid of Armenia during this tragic event, the ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh? Who else comes to the aid of one side of the conflict to escalate but France? But France. The French government has now been kicked out of all its former African colonies, of which it was reaping in billions in collecting debts. And Foreign Minister Colonna of France traveled to Yerevan, which is the capital of Armenia, and Armenia has agreed to allow Paris to send military equipment hours after Armenia upholds the the criminal court, the Rome Statute, which states, so hours after they uphold the Rome Statute, which is to say that if Putin ever visits, like the International Criminal Court convicts, is enforcing the responsibility to convict Vladimir Putin if he leaves Russia and goes to any member country of the International Criminal Court, that country has the responsibility to arrest Vladimir Putin as a supposed war criminal. Armenia, which has been an ally of Russia for decades, even after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia being its primary benefactor, defense guarantor, and supplier of resources like natural gas, the Prime Minister of Azerbaijan is turning away from his primary ally for the past 30 years and saddling up with the United States and now France. Funny. Funny how as soon as France gets kicked out of its African colonies, it goes right immediately, within weeks, getting involved in an imperial conflict on a different continent that the US is also leading. It's almost like this is planned. Which just goes to show the correctness of booting out these metropolitan war pigs, these globalists, wherever they rear their heads, whether they be in Washington, D.C., like Kevin McCarthy and Lindsey Graham and all those other people pushing for war and pushing to invade Mexico and pushing to send $100 more billion to Ukraine, or whether they be French globalists like Emmanuel Macron or this other French politician, Minister Colonna. These people, these globalists, are looking out for their own interests, which is preserving their global monopoly of finance, making sure that no other region, even a region, tiny little Armenia, which has no economy to speak of, using them as a wedge to prevent the development of other spheres of influence in the world. to prevent the rapid development that can only happen under revolutionary forces, as Ibrahim Traore, president of Burkina Faso, the youngest president in the world right now, he's 35. He's 4 years older than me. That can only happen under this kind of popular government. Go and look at pictures of on September 30th, which marked the 1 year anniversary of the Burkina Faso revolutionary government led by Ibrahim Traore. Go and look at the pictures of that anniversary. Hundreds and hundreds of people surrounding him and celebrating him, waving flags. You go to Mali and Niger. You go to Niger, where General Tiani fills stadiums, thousands of people in support of him. You go to Washington D.C. and you see this presidential debate with Chris Christie and Vivek Ramaswamy. They can barely fill up a room when you get 6 of those guys together. That's not popular government. They don't care. They're simply interested in maintaining their finance monopoly and keeping you enslaved and permanently in debt. That's just my opinion. I want to know what you think. And I can only get your opinion when you follow the barracks, when you like and subscribe to the YouTube, when you join us on X, formerly Twitter, when you join us to the Telegram channel. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know. Where do you find yourself most involved? I know a lot of you are long-time chatters in the YouTube comment section, Screws in a Bell, long time. I know Ron Swanson, also a long time fan in the YouTube. Yankee Tanky, former host. Of course, he's holding it down. Yeah, that's the main strategy right now, is growing the Twitter page. After we saw some explosive growth last month, we got 1,000% followers in 3 days. And so that's the main strategy right now, is to grow the Twitter. And then from the Twitter, funneling subscribers to the YouTube page so that we can increase our capacity to bring to bring the news and to bring analysis, geopolitics to this more in-depth platform. But I want to know where y'all get most involved and what you want me to talk about. Because I got to be honest. I'm just I'm just coming at this. I don't have a professional degree in journalism or media analysis or geopolitics. I just spend my time reading, following up on the news, using the immortal science of dialectical materialism. But I can't have eyes everywhere. The people's deep state demands loyal cadre. And as I am a benevolent dictator, and I consider myself, a humble warlord, and I open it up for democracy. What you would like me to talk about? Because with this Nagorno-Karabakh conflict in Armenia, I've only been reviewing the news for a few weeks, and it's a lot to. Sometimes it's a lot to. You find yourself unsure of how to take a position, especially when you have to find alternate sources from CNN. I know we had an interview a couple of weeks ago with a guy called Sul. It's Armenian. I might just delete that video from this YouTube. I won't, because I'm not a coward, and I will stand by my mistakes if I made them. But Sewell is one of those guys now pushing for insurgency in Armenia, but like saying we must oust Prime Minister Ashinyan by any means necessary. We even guerrilla warfare. And now I'm embarrassed to have had that interview with the guy. I'm like, dang, he had this like $5,000 GoFundMe going to God knows where, money going to God knows where in Armenia, which is now like going to be flooded with guns. Oh my God. You know, I just wanted to learn about what's going on in the Caucasus. And now I'm like, I might be like condemned by association with this frothing lunatic. Which just goes to show that, you know, when Milkman said, when we were having an interview, even back then, he said in the middle of it, you know, you never trust student-led protests. Well, he was right. Not to say we supported it at the time, but, you know, given, you know, when we call on for people to get word on the ground, even people who are on the ground are not necessarily, doesn't necessarily represent the popular majority, who just want to see wars de-escalate, who don't want to see insurgency actually, who don't want to see a hot war burning down, you know, burning down their homeland actually. Huh. Maybe this idea of you know, going to the jungle and role playing as a guerrilla fighter is bad actually. Ever think about that? Yeah, I guess Sewell never thought about that. So if you do see Sewell on Twitter, I don't know, you're free to associate with whoever you want, but he's probably going to reach out to you as he did to us in the DMs, begging for money to send to God knows who in Armenia, probably insurgents. Can't verify that, but neither can he, because he won't say to who it's going to. So. Yeah. I want to thank you all for tuning in. This one last time, I'll drop the Telegram page. We have 12 whole subscribers in the Telegram. You know, soon I hope to be at the level of what DD Geopolitics, Donbass Devushka. I hope to be at her level one day. She has quite, you know, she has set up quite the, you know, quite the little news empire going on. So yeah, go in the chat. You can give us a follow. Trying to keep it short today. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. Those tuning in now and those tuning in the future. But, you know, in the interest of keeping it short, you know, we'll be signing off for today. My name is Teray, Iron Sun USA on Twitter. And with that, that's all I got, folks. I'm out.